Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. Today is the second video in a three-part series on the worst therapists of all time. Number 3 on our list was Sigmund Freud, who was the father of psychotherapy and did a bunch of anti-scientific things, and that got him on the list. Also kind of just being like not a great person in general, which is going to be a bit of a theme on the list here. So today, our number 2 worst therapist of all time, in my opinion, right? Like Dr. Phil McGraw. Many of you, if you had regular TV, would know Dr. Phil from Sick Days because he was part of that like middle of the day self-help stuff. Why was that a thing on TV? Why were we watching self-help in the middle of the day all the time? Anyway, Dr. Phil has been on TV since 2002. And before that, he was a regular guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show. We'll get into Dr. Phil's history. Dr. Phil, not a real, well, he has a PhD, not a licensed practicing therapist. So putting him on the list is a little bit of a misnomer on his end because he's been practicing therapy without a license for a long time, if you can call the self-help stuff practicing therapy, which is part of the reason he's on the list, because he's done a lot of damage in muddying the waters of like what self-help versus therapy looks like. His show is Dr. Phil. He was involved in a show called The Doctors. Like, he's been around kind of this like snake oil salesman-y stuff that I think has given rise to a lot of like the Marcus Aubrey, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, if you will, like the snake oil salesman-y podcasters who are selling stuff. Capitalism makes really terrible things happen. Like, people sell stuff and they're grifters, and maybe someday if I get a large enough following, I'll sell some merch on my website. But that's different than selling like weight loss drugs or muscle building growth hormones or things that could cause harm and aren't FDA approved and are unscientific, touted as science. Fun fact, Dr. Phil sold weight loss drugs for a while. So who's Dr. Phil? Why is he so bad? Right? I'm just rambling because I have ADHD. Dr. Phil has his PhD in psychology. He studied psychology at the University of North Texas. Back in the day, I mean, he got his degree in the late 80s. His dad owned a self-help group. I don't know. They sold like self-help presentation. So I think Dr. Phil kind of started along with that into the family business around self-help. He grew up as kind of being involved in his dad's business once he had his licensure and degree. And Dr. Phil was a licensed therapist. He was doing psychotherapy. He was using his degree in that late 80s time frame, but definitely since like 1988 when his dad sold this company, and it was shown, like, that's when we can show through financial disclosures that Dr. Phil was involved in the McGraw family business there, that he's been involved in like the self-help side of things just as much, if not more, than the psychotherapy side of things. So yeah, then he sold this business for a couple $100,000. Again, because their filings, it's like $325,000, whatever. He didn't become a millionaire there, but like that's a big chunk of change, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. That's a lot of money. And he went on to build a company that offered lawyers and legal people. He was selling psychological services to the legal system, and that's how he met Oprah Winfrey, actually. So he was an advisor, and his company that was selling like, this is how to use psychology to your advantage when picking witnesses. This is how to trying to affect the juries that you're going to work with. This is how to bring up psychologically important concepts in a case and trial. So he was doing that, which, like, benefit of the doubt was good work, but sounds like, kind of grifty, and like that's how you're going to make money off of it, like profiting, not to like help shore up the business side of like psychology and be like a great advocate for mental health in the legal system. It just seemed like a money-making business. doing well, obviously, if you're getting Oprah as a client. So he helped Oprah. I don't know what case that was. I couldn't find that on Oprah's end. I'm guessing it maybe got settled out of court. But Oprah was sued for something, probably like snake oil salesman. I'll call out Oprah too. I don't care. Um, I'm hypothesizing. I don't know that. Like I said, I could not find the case. Backing off on calling out Oprah right away there. Because Oprah and Dr. Phil have been shown to be quite litigious. Um, so it's one of those things where, like, right, he's in the money making business. I don't know. We have some information which I will get to about his psychotherapy practices that also weren't great, but like kind of on the business entrepreneurial side of things. So he sold that company then and launched the Dr. Phil show with the help of Oprah. So worked with Oprah, helps her win her case or settle her case or whatever happened there, and then went into the daytime show business. It was a couple years into the Dr. Phil show where he dropped his license and stopped doing psychotherapy because he was sued multiple times for being a licensed therapist and being in the realm of doing psychotherapy ostensibly. And so like he decided not to stay licensed. If someone offers me millions of dollars to do YouTube instead of being a licensed therapist, I would think about it. Not because I want to be YouTube famous. I love doing therapy, but $1 million, man, in late stage capitalism. Um, so yeah, he ran into problems, and this is a thing that I think kind of follows him throughout his career. And while I'll highlight like this was harmful and this does damage to the profession as a whole, of not having very good boundaries, and I would say ethically like crossing boundaries, where he's representing himself one way, Dr. Phil, like your lovable Southern psychology specialists. But he's not doing therapy. And so I think definitely muddying some waters there. His therapy business seems to have closed as well. That would make sense. You can't do therapy if you're not licensed. So, but he has a bit of a laundry list of complaints against him. He had ethical complaints against the board, which again, like that's a thing that is public record. So we know that about relationships with former clients. His first wife, his ex-wife, I think it was his ex-wife, also said some like kind of not great things about him as like misogynistic, and just kind of like the way he treated her seems to have been a way that he treated women. He had one lawsuit against him for raping a client, and like benefit of the doubt here, like every therapist in the world, I guess I don't know about internationally, every therapist in America carries malpractice insurance because we can get sued for any number of things. And so like you have to have malpractice insurance, right? Like client could slip in the hallway and sue you, or you could do really bad therapy, like whatever, you just have to have malpractice insurance. So like the fact that a client would come after him is not super unheard of. I will say I'm coming up on 15 years in the business and have never had a complaint against me. My neighbors who are mad about our bird feeders have filed lots of complaints about me, though. That's a different YouTube video. So again, like I'm trying to be gracious here and not just be like get YouTube rage clicks. Like, is it possible that this was somebody who was just trying to make money off Dr. Phil once he got famous? Sure. Doesn't seem to be that. Like it was a long, drawn out process for them. Like the legal case took a long time, and like Dr. Phil's been mean to them in other venues and sued people who have interviewed this client. So like again, that litigious thing, and not necessarily like what I would say an innocent person is doing. So yeah, I don't know, like a history of crossing boundaries, hiring former clients, or having dual relationships with former clients, which is a big no-no. Like all of our ethical classes say, like don't sleep with your clients, and that's hammered into us. But there are all these other rules, like you're not even supposed to be friends with former clients. You're not supposed to hang out with clients. There's not supposed to be any sort of like impropriety. And I know America has no concept of what ethics look like because the Supreme Court is the ruling court in our land, which doesn't even have an ethics code, let alone wouldn't follow it if it did. Separate topic as well. But real life people have to follow ethical codes, and we can lose our licenses if we don't follow ethical codes. So like this is a problematic trend of him kind of ignoring that, and that he was like cited by the board who issued his license as like stop doing that, because it's too easy when you're a therapist. innately in a position of power. And I think therapists who are good therapists are trying to be aware of that power and not like take advantage of that power, and even the playing field for their clients with them. But a bad therapist is just going to be like authoritarian and be like, I don't know, that Freud model of like, I'm the expert and I'm just going to tell you what's going on in your life because I'm better than you. And so I think good therapists and therapists who are coming from a more postmodern lens and a humanistic lens are going to be building their clients up and not trying to be that authoritative power. But it seems like he liked that, and that's really his vibe and kind of what he did over and over and over again. And then a pattern of like people who speak out against it, he takes them to court, or they were taking him to court for damages. So like that's a red flag for sure. Like that's not necessarily someone who's like great therapist. Everybody gives them their stamp of approval. That's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's yucky, and it fits the overall pattern then, because when we get into the show, it's all about exploitation. Like his show was not about helping people. His show was about ratings. His show was about him making money and him selling products to get money and to get advertisers and blah blah blah. Like it's all very exploitative. It isn't about mental health and promoting mental health and helping people who are downtrodden. So lots of instances on a show where he just did things that were unethical and kind of gross. He had camera people follow people around while they were looking for drugs. Like again, a therapist is going to try and help someone, not try and record them at their low points and then clip it. Lots and lots of complaints from people who've been on a show to say like the way that it's edited and clipped is made to be more dramatic or make them look worse. Even people in his audience would have sued him or done different things, made complaints about him because of like they'll do like really fun like giveaways and like contests, like guess who, I don't know, who's the tallest person in the audience or whatever, like fun like game show things, like Price is Right kind of things. And then like these like not horrific, but like super heavy topics of like, childhood rape and like just suicide and like these things that are heavy that you probably need some prep for, and also probably need to like process after the episode's filmed. And like none of that happened. It was just like, smile for the cameras, we're doing a giveaway, and then like, oh, here's this really heavy topic that none of you are prepared for. So just like not being aware of the impact his work could have on people and just being like very geared towards making money. He didn't offer follow-up services to people. Like he wasn't helping them. He wasn't like, come on my show and I'll do therapy with you. It was just like, come on my show, we'll record. And then like people would have breakdowns, and like he was sued by employees for having a toxic work environment because like they're left to clean up the mess of these people who like have these really intense things in a pretty intense environment being filmed on TV. And then like he just kind of left them like, the episode's done, so go back to the green room and like cry. Also, instances of like having people who were coming on about sobriety, and he would have alcohol in the dressing rooms or the green rooms. He had people like taking, like his staff gave out Xanax to try and get people to either be like high or inebriated on the show, like because it's better for ratings. So like, again, just really gross, like not a thing that any therapist that I know and like and recommend would ever be okay with. Like that's so yucky and opposite of what our field is all supposed to be about. And so all this exploitation going on throughout his career, both as a therapist and then in the self-help field, he was sued and like lost like $10 million suit about like a weight loss drug that he was I don't know if he advertised it or it was on a show or he promoted it. So like, again, just that griftiness around like, Alex Jones is a good example just because like we know for sure he's a conspiracy theorist, although I would also say we know for sure Joe Rogan's a conspiracy theorist at this point. But like those guys who like have these grifts going on of like, buy your ultra testosterone manly man butt wipes and here's your steroids dressed up as some sort of whey protein, or here's this unfounded supplement that will make you better. Like that griftiness of like, not only am I going to like exploit other people, but then I'm going to sell something to keep the exploitation going. So just really gross. The advice he offered on his show was either like so convoluted as to not be particularly meaningful. That'll circle back for our number one worst therapist of all time, or was just super basic. So like he kind of was a cognitive behavioral therapist. It seems like most of the advice he gave was what we would call CBT, which is fine. It's like I have a negative take on CBT because insurance companies like it, and that's a red flag. If insurance companies like it, red flag, because they're for profit. So they want to be able to decline people. CBT is just kind of your basic, like, I don't know. CBT is not bad, but there's way better things, I think. And so it's just similar of again, he's just kind of offering advice that sounds great or sounds smart, but like isn't going to be super meaningful. Doesn't seem like he ever really went too much deeper than that. Also, he did like a lot of harmful things where he would like watch video of a teen, or he would see like parents would come on and share video they took, and like he would start diagnosing or throwing around like heavy diagnoses, and like that looks like a serial killer. And like you can't do that. Like he's not a licensed therapist anymore, so he wasn't practicing therapy, but as a licensed therapist, you cannot diagnose someone who's not in the room. So being like, hey, it sounds like your partner has a personality disorder, like that's not good. Like you can't do stuff like that. And therapists are aware of that because it's easy in therapy to hear stuff like that, and we as therapists can't turn off our therapy brains, and so we might say like, I don't know this person, or this person's not my client, so I can't diagnose them, but like it sounds like X, Y, or Z, if that's helpful for our client that we're working with, not to just be slapping labels on everything. But he definitely did that. And again, just like as a ratings ploy, it's kind of everything he was doing, I put under that umbrella. It's not so much that like one thing was worse than another, but definitely like exploitative and kind of like the shock and awe. And like we see the worst versions of that now. So Dr. Phil being popular, over 3,000 episodes filmed. I think his show just wrapped up recently, or his contract ran out or whatever. He was also like a showrunner for The Doctors, which was a short-lived like panel of doctors that was shown to like barely above 50% of the time. I shouldn't say that. I'm exaggerating. I think it was like 63% of the time had advice that was based on medical information, but like the rest of the show was either against or not based on anything. So like again, just kind of comfortable, and I think the popularity of shows like that then have given rise to what I would say is like the worst part of the internet and like YouTube, where it's just like all griftiness and, you know, so yeah, a little bit of a spoiler where like I think some of Dr. Phil's stuff created the monster that is the number one worst therapist on my list. But Dr. Phil like did a lot of bad stuff, and what little bit he gave back to his clients was next to useless. Like I would say like a psych major who's not licensed could probably be giving the advice that he was giving. And CBT has some issues as far as like not necessarily being great with like neurodivergence, not being great and from a social justice perspective. So I think again, just like kind of that straight white male patriarchal approach to mental health, as opposed to sort of anything close to nuanced or inclusive. So that's problematic. One of my favorite Dr. Phil clips that I've seen, and this one I think has gone viral several times on the internet. So I've seen it more than once, but like in prepping for my video here, I definitely saw it and laughed again every time. Dr. Phil invited this guy. The internet's different in 2023 than it was back in 2007 or 2008. But he invited a guy who had a website called Bum Fights, and this guy went around and he paid homeless people to fight each other. He recorded it and put it on the internet, made money off of it. Super exploitative and terrible. The guy who owns Bum Fights is in no way, shape, or form a good person or a hero to be looked up for. Dr. Phil invited the guy who owned Bum Fights onto his show, and this guy showed up dressed up like Dr. Phil. He shaved his head in the classic Dr. Phil. He grew out a mustache. He came with like an ill-fitting suit to make his shoulders look broader. I'm like constantly slumping. Like I don't know, like the fake machismo of men who are like, look at how broad I am. Like I'm always slumping, so I look smaller than I am. The weird like fake masculinity around the internet. Like look at my hair and my beard. Like I'm not, I don't know. The machismo, the guys who are like obsessed with machismo are like bald and 5'2", looking your way, Joe Rogan, or Andrew Tate, who has like, bald and terrible ears and is like, And I'm not trying to shame people. Like, you can look how you look. Like, I'm just saying it's clearly overcompensating for their own insecurities. Dr. Phil had those super broad shoulder pads on um his suits that he always wore. And like Dr. Phil like played college football. Like, dude was an actual, I think, legit athlete. I don't know if it's insecurity from like being past your glory days. So you don't peak too early, people. I keep saying 45 is my goal for peaking. Um but yeah, so the guy from Bum Fights comes on dressed as Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil is just furious with him because he shows up to the TV taping like this and like reams him out about how terrible and exploitative he is. And the guy who owned Bum Fights is just like, I'm you. Like, I'm the same as you. Your show and my show are the same. Like, why are you coming at me? And Dr. Phil kicked him off the show. So anyway, like, that's a great bit of television. The guy from Bum Fights certainly knew how to get clicks, just like Dr. Phil was going for clicks. So like a weird early viral internet moment, but like, yeah, the guy from Bum Fights, bad person. Dr. Phil could identify that, came to have him on a show to call him out, and like that guy was like, nah, you're just as exploitive. And the guy from Bum Fights owned it. Like, he's like, right, what I'm doing isn't like good or for the benefit of society. Like, this is just my job, and like whatever, people are paying for it. So what does that say about them? Which, like, what does it say about you that you're doing that? That's not good. You're not a good person. But also highlighting that Dr. Phil was not a good person in kind of a gotcha, not like a gotcha moment, but like a made for TV moment. Like, I'm going to come into your turf, which is your TV show, and like make a spectacle of it because that's all you care about. And that's the only way to get you to listen. And Dr. Phil, of course, made zero changes and learned nothing from the experience. But that was a fun little thing that happened on a show. That's a good clip. You can check that out. I would link to it, but I don't have enough subscribers for YouTube to let me link in my videos. So, yeah. So yeah, Dr. Phil, the one little bit of redeeming information I could find about Dr. Phil was, pretty much every therapist who's ever been interviewed about Dr. Phil is like, his advice is either bad and wrong or like so basic as to not be useful. So giving out lots of bad advice and being super exploitative. There was like one meta-analysis done around his show that suggested not a super strong correlation, but like people were a little bit more likely to seek therapy if they watched his show than if not. So like if somebody had a problem and watched an episode that was related to their issue, they were a little bit more likely to go to therapy than not. But like, that's such a minimal thing for what I think, again, sets the whole profession back, and I think has given rise to a lot of the self-help community being just snake oil salesmen and grifters. Like, capitalism attracts those things and rewards that type of behavior as like, we don't need to be scientific and we don't need to do this. We just need to prey on people's emotions so that we can sell them something for profit. And like, that's problematic. And that was his whole business model. So really gross and exploitative. He was involved in other exploitative behaviors from some of the self-help businesses he helped launch, some of the products he helped sell that didn't help people the way they were supposed to, and also like launching another show that was unscientific, that never quite took off the way. But like, Dr. Oz is still around. So like, that whole self-help guru afternoon daytime television kind of stuff, not great, like not helpful. So even with that little bit of like, hey, people were maybe a little bit more likely to go to therapy after watching Dr. Phil, like what he was doing wasn't a good encapsulation of therapy, and probably didn't set people up for good expectations about therapy. Like, you go in for half an hour and somebody says some like southern twangy stuff and like, your problems are fixed. Like, that unfortunately is not how it works. So yeah, I try and approach this as like, was there some good done? Like a minimal amount of good. I don't know, that being on the air for 21 years and having a slight correlation with people maybe being okay going to therapy is great. Like, if his mission had been, I'm going to normalize mental health and we're going to get people in therapy and like normalize that process and speak up for people who don't have a voice and like be helpful and give all this money away, and we're gonna be a nonprofit, like, hey, I'm here for all that. Like, I have a podcast, your therapist needs therapy. All right, like, I'm sneaking in a plug here. Because I think it's good information. Like, it's out normalizing mental health. I talk to therapists about going to therapy and their own mental health. Like, if that was Dr. Phil's mission and he had put 20 years of his life into that, and like, if he became a millionaire while doing that, but gave so much more money away, like, awesome. More power to you. Like, therapists should get paid. People who work in mental health have a hard job. You should be able to pay your bills by going to your job. Like, I'm here for that. I support all of that. Very anti-capitalism. Um, it's a terrible system. The exploitation is built in. And yet, like, that's not what he was doing. He was just cashing in from the get-go. That seems to be his pattern. His pattern seems to be, I'm better than you. I'm going to make money off of you because I get to be the expert and tell you what's what. And all I care about is making money off of that. So, yeah, not a good figure, not like a positive figure. Unfortunate, I think, that most people would know who Dr. Phil was and not any number of great therapists out there. Even when I talk to other therapists, I talk to therapists about people who I really like Harleen Anderson's my go-to therapist. Like, she wrote Conversations, Language, Possibility. I went to one of her trainings. She was great. She's like this little 80-year-old lady, and she's just so wonderful. And like most therapists I know, most licensed professionals I know have never heard of her because the style of therapy I do is kind of niche. And so, like, again, like that, he's this cultural figure and everybody knows him. Same with Freud. Like, everybody knows Freud. I'm colloquially using the word everybody there. Most people know Freud. Most people know Dr. Phil. The fact that these are such big names in our industry when they were not doing good therapy, they were unscientific, or they were doing harm is not good. Like, that's not great. That's not helpful to our profession. And their missions were about making themselves better, not about helping other people better, as in richer. So, not great. Another kind of like cult of personality type who was in it for their own ego and their own wealth making, really just exploiting people across the board. The other big thing that I missed, I forgot. I was just running through my head of my talking points that I maybe missed. Like, I could do a script, but I don't. You're getting the real Jer here. Was he did like a weird publicity stunt when Britney Spears was in the hospital post like mental breakdown. I don't follow pop culture, and I definitely was worse about it in the past than I am now. So I don't know. I don't remember all the extent of what was going on with her. Some sort of mental breakdown. Being a celebrity is not a healthy thing. And like, he wasn't like associated with her at all. Like, he hadn't helped her. He wasn't doing therapy. No, nothing. He just like took his camera crew and like raided the hospital to try and get footage. And like, he got a lot of pushback for that, which is good and appropriate, because that's also yucky. But like, that exploitation and trying to like get some fame through somebody else's problems is gross. But like, that's literally all he ever did. Like, that, the fact that everybody lost their mind over that publicity stunt and not just his regular show was like problematic in and of itself. Like, that was his business model. No one should be surprised that he did that. So I think those were kind of the big scandals. But like, his career is littered with scandals because there's just exploitation across the board. He's taking advantage of people, not helping people, making false claims or misleading people so that he can make money off of them. So just kind of a classic grifter, con artist, and not at all what I would think as far as good quality for being a therapist that I would recommend and hope that people see. So, Dr. Phil McGraw, number 2 on the worst therapists list of all time, in my opinion. So, Freud at number 3, Dr. Phil at number 2. Number 1, I dropped some hints. I thought of a bunch of hints that just absolutely give it away. So, I don't know that I've given it away yet. But number 1 will probably be up in 2 weeks, if I can stick to my recording schedule. I have ADHD, so sometimes my media stuff is hard. I'm not doing this to get internet famous. I'm doing this maybe for like light entertainment, to put out good information, really, but so that if people want to work with me, they can see me and hear me and decide if they want to work with me or not. So, doing a little bit of a bit here with a 3-part series on the worst therapist of all time. But yeah, look at me doing promotional work. The number 1 worst therapist of all time, in my opinion. That video will be out in 2 weeks, probably after some more music video reviews. How exciting. So thanks for stopping by, checking out my channel. I got a comment from someone last time. Look at you, subscribers, leaving comments. Love it. Do the YouTube stuff. It's supposed to be helpful. I appreciate it. I responded to the comment, so I'm involved. If you have a video idea or you want me to review a song or a show or whatever, hit me up. I struggle sometimes to think of content. When you do therapy all day, every day, and it's been your profession for a long time, you can a bit lose sight of like what other people want to know about, because there are things that I just sort of are ingrained or not. I don't want to say I take for granted, but like it's such a normal part of my job that I forget that um, other people care about it. So yeah, if you want to hear about like my take on something related to mental health, drop down, leave a comment, and I will get to it. And we'll get to the number one worst therapist of all time in a couple weeks. Make sure you like and subscribe and tune in for that. Ugh, I hate doing the promotional work. I can't imagine having a 21-year television show. Do you just tell yourself? It feels so gross just doing like these terrible promotional little bits that I'm doing. I'm rambling. Everybody, peace out. Take care.